the Iraq War essentially created ISIS, destabilizing the region, empowering extremists. And the U.S. has had alliances with terrorist organizations throughout history, and so there is a similarity there in the utilization of extremists for a geostrategic purpose. And as far as what's the difference or what our difference is, I really think I can't really think of anything there to
It's just bad
contrast.
all the way around, huh?
It's a comparison, and to contrast it is difficult
Yeah.
because that's what it is. It's essentially
Well, I think
it's policies that escalate the threat of terrorism for geostrategic purposes, and that really
right.
is the similarity.
Well, and I think as for people who are American centric, or people who you know think that it's good to promote American interests, whatever that might be. Whether that's making making these sorts of deals. I guess one thing that is interesting that you mentioned is that this isn't a popular thing in Israel. I'm not sure we'd say the same thing about in the U.S., although I think it's losing popularity. The since 9/11, it's been still I think there's a lot of remnants of people wanting to prop up the American empire. So it's interesting to me that you say that maybe that's not as popular in Israel as it might be.
10/7 was blowback for Netanyahu, the same as 9/11 was blowback for U.S. policies.
Yeah. One of the arguments that Eli made is that Zionism at its core, or is fundamentally, or it's impossible for Zionism to be colonialists, that they are by definition anti-colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an interesting argument. I wouldn't call Gaza a colony of Israel, but talk about that. Like, is Zionism anti-colonialist? And I'm sorry, I'm trying to find a good argument for that. But,
Well, his basic argument is that the Jews have an ancient historical connection to the land. So if they return to the land, how can you call them colonizers? Well, the answer to that is simple. I mean, number one, first of all, anyone can convert to Judaism.
right.
And so, and I pointed out how DNA studies show that Ashkenazi Jews, while along paternal lines, there is a close, there is ancestry to the Levant area, which is that region from, stretching from like Egypt to Syria. But along maternal lines, there was a lot of conversion to Judaism. And so, how strong is the ancestral connection to Palestine among many Ashkenazi Jews who immigrated from Europe? That's one question. But this to me is really beside the point. And I pointed this out in the debate. I just made the point that, property rights aren't based on DNA, and DNA is no basis for property rights. And so to deny that it was a settler colonial project, modern political Zionism was a settler colonial project by definition. In fact, you had colonization associations that had the word colonization in the title of their association. Like the Palestine Jewish Colonization Association, which was settling Jewish immigrants into Palestine alongside the Zionist organization. Although the British, in one of their reports investigating one of the outbreaks of violence of Arabs against Jews during the Mandate era, pointed out how this wasn't a result of anti-Semitism among the Arabs, but anti-Zionism. And they pointed out the distinction between the PICA colonies, which was the Palestine Jewish Colonization Association, where they didn't have the same policies as the Zionist organization colonies, where the Zionist organization had a policy of, number one, exploiting feudalistic Ottoman land laws to purchase large plots of land from absentee landlords with prejudice towards the property rights of the poor Arab peasants who had homesteaded that land. Um, and in many in cases that involved expulsions of entire villages of Arabs. But then once they purchased the land, and again, they only had managed to acquire about 7% of the territory of Palestine through purchase by the end of the mandate. But once they purchased the land, it was their policy to deny Arabs any employment on the land. Whereas this wasn't the case in the Pica colonies. And the British pointed out how you can go through the Pica colonies and you see Arabs and Jews sitting together chatting on porches. They were neighbors. They were friendly, had friendly relations. Which was a great contrast to the Zionist organization colonies. Another example was there was a Jewish landowner who was being pressured by the Zionist organization to to stop employing Arab workers on his farm. And he was against that. He didn't want to do that, number one, because he was friends with them. And he told the British, like, I'm against this policy because, number one, we have friendly relations, and why would I want to ruin that? And then two, because they were good workers and he wanted to keep them employed. But he was pressured as a Jewish landowner to essentially fire all of his Arab employees and hire Jews only. And so you have the British investigations were really quite thorough and detailed in documenting that, contrary to the Zionist propaganda narrative, where you have the outbreaks of 1920, 1921, the Hebron massacre in 1929, we're told that these are proof that Arabs, the root cause is just inherent Arab hatred of Jews. But the British conclusions in every instance was that no, the problem is that the Arabs are becoming increasingly aware of how the Zionists aim to subject and dispossess them. And then they quoted, like from saying things like, and this isn't just among the more extreme elements of Zionism. And you had, like leading members of the Zionist movement coming out and telling the British, about how that was their aim. They wanted to subject and dispossess the Arabs. They wanted to reconstitute Palestine into a demographically Jewish state. So I don't know how you can reasonably deny that this was a settler colonial project.